Hello, film lovers, and welcome to the first episode of the Way Too Indiecast, the official podcast of way2indie.com, which is the coolest new film site on the web. I don't know if anyone says the web anymore. I think the internet's too old now. But anyways, I'm Bernard Boo, a writer at way2indie.com, and I'm coming to you from Walnut Creek, right outside of San Francisco, California. And joining me today are my co-hosts, Dustin Jancic, the editor-in-chief at way2indie.com, coming to you from South Dakota. Also joining me is CJ Prince, another writer from the website, a fellow writer who's coming to us from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And yeah, that's us. This is Way Too Indie, and we're so pleased for any of you who clicked on this to give us a listen. We really appreciate anyone who came to listen to us. This is the first podcast, of which we hope will be many in a series of podcasts. And, we thought today, to start it off, we talk about the hottest movie out right now, which is Guardians of the Galaxy. And I know what you're saying. This is the Way2Indie.com podcast. Why the hell are you talking about a big Marvel Disney movie? And, we thought that it'd be interesting to explore the indie ties, the clear indie ties that Guardians of the Galaxy has to our community, with James Gunn, of course, helming that film. So we're going to talk about that, our reactions to that film. CJ and I have seen it. Dustin has not. So CJ and I are going to talk about that one and our reactions to that film itself. And then we're going to go into our largest subject, which is independent film directors who came from that background, who kind of graduated up or moved up into a more mainstream community directing big budget movies. Before we get into all of that, we're going to talk about the upsetting news that we got yesterday at the time of this recording, that Robin Williams passed away yesterday due to asphyxiation from suicide. Just terrible news. I know it shocked everybody. What did you guys think of that when you heard the news?
I mean, it's hard to really say, you expect these kinds of things. So it was a total surprise. It just kind of came out of nowhere. And then I guess, once I think I saw, someone found a report from the police, and then that just spread like wildfire. But yeah, no, I was completely surprised by it.
Yeah, we're an independent film website, and, but really, truly, we're all just film lovers, and Rob Williams has contributed so much to movies, especially for people our age, I think, right, guys, like millennials who grew up with the genie and all that. And I mean,
as far as growing up, definitely around that time, I think we hit the right, the right time period where we sort of saw Aladdin and Miss Doubtfire and all those sort of kids movies, Jack, Jumanji. He did a lot of those, really targeted towards the mid 90s. So he definitely resonates with a lot of people our age.
He did, have his fair share of, and people, I think they don't realize, but, he worked with a lot of good directors. He worked with, Francis Ford Coppola, Chris Nolan, Terry Gilliam.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fisher King, Gus Van Sant. He had a very wide-ranging career. He's obviously more known for the stuff that, obviously we grew up with. And I think that's why the death is hitting a lot of, it hits a lot of people now, because a lot of people, like you said, they've grown up with his movies as kind of, films of our childhood.
Wait, Christopher Nolan.
Insomnia.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Completely forgot about that.
Yeah, Mark Romanek. I'm just naming these off the top of my head, but yeah, so I think, he had a really wide, varied career. And, I think that's why it's just personally hitting people, because, as Bernard said, we've all, grown up with his movies.
Mm-hmm.
I remember watching Jumanji in theaters.
Oh gosh, I still have such a place in my heart for that movie, even though it's I could never say it was great or but it was probably I can remember going to the theater and seeing Jumanji and having a ton of fun. With my family, kind of laughing at that. I was never a Robin Williams guy or a Jim Carrey guy. Like those two never really kind of made me laugh that much, to be honest. But I actually quite adored some of his dramatic work, like in Insomnia. I love his performance in that movie. I thought he was very capable on both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, a lot of people kind of say 1 Hour Photo is sort of his crazy, sort of breakout out of his norm type of stuff. But yeah, he did do other, he wasn't always just his straight up character that he always seems to play with the funny guy. He did some other roles too.
I've noticed, if you go on social media, I think what was kind of heartwarming to me and a little surprising, I guess not in hindsight, was that the character that seems to resonate with most of my friends and people our age is the genie from Disney's Aladdin. I think we all kind of take solace in that movie. And that way, it's a warm memory, and he stole the show in that one, of course.
Yeah, he really did it. I mean, almost to like a distracting amount, but I mean, he literally did steal the show, though, for sure. Like, definitely carried the film. I mean, you listen to it and you could just see Robin Williams. I mean, it was just like everything that he owned that role. It was definitely him. Yeah, although my favorite voice of his was definitely Dr. No from Artificial Intelligence. So I suppose he worked with Kubrick in a way then too. So add that to the list.
Yeah, Spielberg. Don't forget Hook, of course.
Oh God.
Oh man.
I was Rufio. Everyone called me Rufio when I was a kid.
I mean, like in terms of childhood movies, the most memorable ones for me were Hook, and obviously Aladdin. And but in terms of like performances I really liked, I mean, I did really like 1 Hour Photo. I think a movie that I wasn't huge on the movie, but I thought Robin Williams did a really good job in was World's Greatest Dad, the Bobcat Goldthwait movie. Yeah. That I mean, if you want to look at towards his more recent work and see like a really good performance, I think that would be a good one because he kind of balances. Yeah,
and it's haunting thinking of that one. The subject matter. It's really
and it kind of shows how as a actor, he he could be so broad, but at the same time, it's a movie like that, he can just walk that line of kind of the really dark subject matter and yet the comedy and absurdity of it so well.
Yeah, I'd say Hook for me as well. I don't really like Aladdin, but I'll carry his performance in that probably to my grave. I'll always remember it. And Insomnia I really liked as well.
If I were going to go like childhood films, I guess I'd have to go Miss Doubtfire. That definitely holds a place in my heart. I love that film. It's ridiculous. But my favorite film of his, if I had to pick my favorite film, just adult and otherwise, would definitely be Dead Poet Society was my favorite of his.
Of course, yeah. Well, our thoughts and our love goes out to his family and everybody who's affected by his death. I know he meant a lot to movie lovers. The majority of us, I think he's affected everybody because he's been so prominent over the past 30 or so years. So Robin Williams, rest in peace. And moving on. We're going to brighten it up a little bit with our talk about Guardians of the Galaxy, James Gunn's new blockbuster, which is kind of did way better at the box office than anyone expected, I think. It took I think, over $100 million now, correct?
Wow. Oh, yeah. It made about, I think it made just under 100 million, like 94, 95 in its opening weekend.
In its opening weekend, which is ridiculous.
Yeah,
I did not expect that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it shows how freaking powerful Marvel is now.
Yeah, and CJ, you've seen the film, and I've seen the film. Dustin has not. So I think this is gonna be our reactions to the film, and I think this is gonna be a bit of a sparring session because I think we have differing opinions.
We do.
All right, so I'll give you first word. Okay.
I actually just watched this last night. It was kind of a spur of the moment thing. So yeah, no, I mean, I've had, friends gush over it, tell me about the movie and all that. I think it's hard for me to talk about on its own because I have to talk about it in the context of the other Marvel movies that I've seen. I haven't seen all of them, seen most, but yeah, to me, I don't know, I just feel like it's the same Marvel movie as the other ones that have come out. They all kind of, not all, but I mean they all have the same kind of plot and story, and there's a really big homogenous quality to these movies that I was fine with at first because it was new. Now I just feel like it's going over the same ground, and I was just kind of really uninterested and bored for the most part watching it. Because it's basically the same story. I said this last night. I said, this movie feels like it's 2 hours of watching.
Well, talk about the plot. Describe the plot?
Okay, yeah, the plot. I mean, I feel like everyone's seen it already, so I didn't want to say it.
I have not.
Dustin hasn't seen it. Yeah, it's true.
This is news to me.
I just made a point and proved myself wrong in the same sentence.
That takes talent.
So it's You know what, Bernard? Maybe you should take this because I don't even know.
You're on the right track. Yeah, Peter Quill. Chris Pratt plays Peter Quill, an Earthling who's abducted when he was a young boy, and he grows up with these Ravagers, as they call them, these kind of thieves, galactic thieves, and he grows up in the galaxy, outer space, with all these alien races. And long story short, he bands together with other D-list Marvel superhero people, including a walking tree, a talking raccoon with a gun fetish, a big strong alien guy whose family's been murdered by a warlord, and a green chick who is affiliated with said warlord. And he bands together with these four people and kind of form a kind of alternative Avengers, if you will, and try to stop the warlord from blowing up the universe, basically. Yeah, so it's a James Gunn film, which is great. I thought that was a really smart choice by Marvel to pick for this, because these are all the rejects of the. I mean, even comic book readers, as I say in my review, which is on the website, I gave the movie an 8. Even comic book readers like myself have little to no knowledge of the Guardians of the Galaxy, Rocket Raccoon and Star-Lord and Gamora. So I think that choosing an indie director like James Gunn, who's most famous film is probably Slither, which was an indie film from years ago, was really cool. And I think he's an outcast himself, and he really imbued the film with his sense of humor and violence and kind of exuberance, indie exuberance that he demonstrates throughout the film, that he also demonstrated in his early trauma work. He's a trauma guy, which kind of leads into our next subject we'll talk about, which that he graduated to a blockbuster level. But I quite enjoyed the film. I enjoyed it a lot, actually. I had a lot of fun. I thought it was hilarious. The plot itself, it didn't blow me away. I'm kind of with you. The plot itself was pretty, standard for Marvel movies, like you said. But I think what really drives the film is the humor and James Gunn's style. I think it's a gorgeous film that uses every color in the rainbow in interesting ways, kind of constantly. And I think the cast is really funny as well. I'm a big pro wrestling fan, which I know it sounds silly, but Batista I was expecting to be just awful in the role, which he was not. I thought he had some really good one-liners, as does almost everybody.
Well, it's also kind of interesting too, because it's the setting of it is interesting. I mean, at least for a Marvel film as well, right? I mean, it takes place in space, and
it's essentially unrelated to the other Marvel movies for all intents and purposes.
Right. Well, that too. It's in a different whatever.
Yeah. Other than the prologue, I mean, it's not like Earth does not play a factor in it at all.
Right.
Which is different because every other Marvel movie so far, either takes place on Earth, or in the case of something like Thor, just it's Earth is key to the plot, or it's about saving Earth or whatever. I said the other night that to me, Guardians of the Galaxy and other Marvel movies, Guardians of the Galaxy specifically, it's like 2 hours of watching people try and put something in storage. That's my issue with the plot. It's just it's a MacGuffin, and that's what all the Marvel movies are kind of like to me, where there's this thing that's going to be really bad and destroy the galaxy or the world, or wipe out people or whatever, and then they have to go and get it, and then the bad guy gets it. Then they get it back.
Well, see, I think you just described a lot of films, not just Marvel films or comic book films, but you just described basically the plot of the Lego Movie, which I loved and adored, and that's kind of a very basic sort of plot.
It's an action adventure. It's an action adventure movie.
It's a MacGuffin, and that's obviously a very familiar, trope in movies. But to me, I didn't find the way it was done in Guardians of the Galaxy didn't really interest me. I love the Lego Movie. I think that's such a great film. I think it's because largely the writing, it's hilarious, and the writing is so smart and so layered.
So good.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, honestly,
it's so you didn't laugh. You didn't laugh in this movie.
No, there was a point where I just sat there and I was like, where are the jokes? I actually was saying that in my mind.
Oh my god.
Yeah. I know. It's just a lot of people making the script sounded too punchy. They had to go in and just insert a joke joke like every 2-3 lines, and they weren't really funny. It was a lot of just the delivery was more selling it than the actual content. I was kind of like, that's not. It wasn't really funny content to me. So I don't know. I mean so I didn't really find it funny. I didn't really care about the characters, so I didn't understand why it was trying to be a poignant in the last act with like Groot and
one thing that I heard in terms of the story from someone who saw it, who did love the film, he did actually say that his one like sort of criticism was that he felt like there was so much like blatant exposition that was like sort of just thrown out there that like just very like setting itself up, but it was very obvious. Like that was one thing that I did hear about. I don't know. So I haven't seen it, so I can't really comment on it. But
that's true. I also have that gripe. It's a common issue in these kind of movies, I think. With big mythologies and stuff like that. But I think I think saying that like it's like watching people put stuff into storage. It is the plot isn't revolutionary. It's not even close to revolutionary. It's a decent at best plot. But I think it's reductive to say that that's all the movie is. I think there are really nice themes of chosen family in this movie because these people have lost their families. All of them have lost their families almost, and they come together and they form a new family, and they really grow to befriend each other. And it's a dysfunctional family, and it's kind of I describe it in my review on waytooindie.com. Give me them clicks. I describe it in my review as if you took all the kind of rejects and bounty hunters and smugglers from Star Wars and gave them their own movie. It feels like that, and I thought it was. I think it is a little reductive to just say the plot isn't great, so the movie isn't great.
So how was Chris Pratt? I want to know how he was.
Oh, he's great.
He's great.
Yeah, I can't deny that Chris Pratt is great. I think I'm actually super happy because I'm a big Parks and Recreation fan that he's becoming this A-list star because he totally deserves it. I think that he's a really great, charismatic, funny actor. That's something about Marvel movies that I will give to them. They know they're casting really well because they know how to cast really charismatic actors in their roles and people that audiences will like. Although I do want to go back to what you're saying with the whole thing about, I'm not saying that because the plot is bad that the movie's bad. I'm not making that kind of connection. I think that for me, when you bring up the themes, for instance, of chosen family and kind of like the outcast quality, yeah, I mean that sure, but I feel like any of those themes and stuff, to me, it just got bogged down by the the plot machinations and all the things. It just feels like there are times where they have to be like, okay, now we got to have the big climactic, attack on the city or whatever.
Which is thrilling. It's completely thrilling. I love it.
I honestly, like, how many times has that happened now? Where
it's the way you do it. Like grilled cheese. Like, how many times have you had grilled cheese? There's a difference between an awesome grilled cheese and a shitty grilled cheese. And this is a really good grilled cheese.
That's the thing. It's like you have all of these qualities, these eccentricities and stuff going on that separate it from the other Marvel movies. But then when you get down to it, it's like it's really the same stuff as everything else. I mean, like, even the climax, and I kind of thought I really didn't like the climax. Also, I have to say, I really like Slither. I have like a very fond place in my heart for Slither.
Yeah, me
didn't really like Super, but
same here.
I think James Gunn really doesn't know how to direct action. I think it was like there were points watching the movie where I was like, this is incomprehensible. I don't know what's going on. I was listening to the score to get like the cues of like, oh, okay, this is when the character is probably in danger, and then when the music gets more triumphant, okay, they got out of it.
Yeah, that wasn't my experience. I didn't get lost, but you know what though, I can understand that. Thinking back on the movie, I can understand if anybody got lost like that for sure. But I think one of my favorite things about the film, before we wrap up here, I think, and I'll give you last word, CJ, of course. I think one of my favorite things is that James Gunn you can feel his DNA in the film, which is really great. Like I love when indie directors who make the jump to mainstream kind of retain that style. And he obviously, I think one of the most talked about aspects of the film is the soundtrack, which is just obviously just songs that he loved growing up and that are from his childhood, and it really kind of make you feel his presence there. In the movie, and gave it a nice kind of it kind of is a nice icing on top of everything for me.
I mean, for me, speaking of the movie, like, it's not that I'm, this anti-Marvel person, because I'm actually quite fond of, Iron Man and Thor and Iron Man 3 too. I think Iron Man 3 suffers, like similar issues to Guardians of the Galaxy, but it's just Shane Black just knows how to make really exciting, great action. But
did you see Captain America this year, the second one?
I haven't seen any of the Captain America.
That's my favorite Marvel movie. It's like a political espionage.
I'm considering Winter Soldier because that sounds more. I always love kind of conspiracy type stories.
Yeah.
But no, like so with Guardians of the Galaxy, I think it's just Marvel has a formula and they're doing really good at it and they're incredibly successful. But for me, I think I'm just at a point now where I can see what they're doing. I kind of just like, I want them to change it up, but it's the same old thing to me now, and I'm getting kind of restless watching them.
The skeleton of it is very common for these type of action adventures, and especially the ones Marvel puts out. But the style and the dialogue and the humor, which is a little harsher, I think, than most other Marvel movies and more mean-spirited, I think people will come away pretty happy with that. If you haven't seen it already, I'm sure everyone who's listening to this has seen it. But that'll sum it up for our Guardians of the Galaxy talk. And going from that, we're going to be kind of dovetailing into our into our next subject. You're listening to the Way Too Indiecast, the official podcast of way2indie.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Way2Indie. About James Gunn, people like James Gunn, indie directors who move up in budget and in visibility in directing more mainstream films. There are a ton of them to pick from, but we're going to maybe discuss some we can think of, some of our favorites, some of our least favorites, who made a good transition, who made a bad transition. I'll give Dustin first dibs on this one, since you didn't get to talk much in the last one because you didn't get to talk, or you didn't see it.
Yeah, no, that's true. Well, the two that sort of jump right out at me, the top of my head, would be Rian Johnson. I mean, he's doing the new Star Wars coming up, so it's kind of first of all, it's kind of unfair because obviously we have not seen the Star Wars, so it's hard to say if he's going to do a good job or not.
It's exciting they gave him that gig, though.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he did Brick, and then more recently he did Looper, which I suppose that he's just exponentially getting bigger and bigger, because Looper I wouldn't say that that's an indie film by any means, but it's not
in the middle. It's in the middle.
Yeah, it's kind of in the middle. It's a middle ground. I mean, you got Bruce Willis. He made me excited about Star Wars. Like I will fully admit I'm not a big Star Wars fan. I did not grow up on it.
Wait a second, Dustin. I'm sorry to embarrass you, but I need to tell this story. Me, you, and Ananda were having a little Skype meeting the other day. Everybody, all the listeners, Dustin called it. He said, "I'm not a big fan of the Star Wars." He said the Star Wars.
I think I was going to say the Star Wars franchise in my own defense, but
do you think when George Lucas was kind of with the title, Justin Timberlake walked in, he's like, "Drop the bell, drop the bell."
No, it's funnier, Dustin, if you just own it.
All right. I said the Star Wars. No, yeah, like the Star Wars franchise. I was never a part of it. I never got into it. I just as a kid, as an adult, never did. But this sort of announcement, when it was announced he was going to be directing it, I kind of said I think when I first found that out, to the first person next to me, I'm like, I think I'm finally going to be excited for Star Wars now for the first time in my life, so that's exciting. I mean, we'll see how he does. That he's going to be the next two Star Wars. Am I right on that?
Well, not the next one is Abrams, but then the next two after that, yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yep, exactly. The ones that just sort of was recently announced he would do. So, I mean, that's kind of a little bit unfair. He also did more recently, he did the Breaking Bad episodes, or he's done a few of them. Yeah,
The Fly.
The Fly one, and then some of the more last seasons.
Yes, that's it, CJ.
Ozymandias, the one of that's the craziest, the pinnacle episode of the series. I think when everything goes to hell.
Yeah, exactly.
Very talented.
And he did a great job with that, and so I'm really excited. So that'd be one sort of indie director, coming again from like Brick. Which is a pretty indie film way back in the day. It was a long time ago now. It was almost 10 years ago. But I would say like another one, just thinking at the top of my head, would be like Christopher Nolan. I mean,
yes,
he did The Following and Memento, sort of to start his career. And then he did The Prestige, which again was kind of like the middle ground there. Wasn't that was pretty mainstream. But then he did the Batman franchise on.
You should have said then he did the Batman.
The Batman.
Do the Batman.
He did the Batman. And then now more recently he's going to do Interstellar. So I mean he's one that he's came from and Insomnia. I mean we mentioned it earlier in his career.
And he's so pure. Like his path to success is so pure, and he earned it. And
totally.
Like he made great films, and he earned his spot. I love that. I love that he made it there.
And he's probably a good example of someone who was able to sort of keep a lot of fans of his early work. He's just a talented director, so I think that for him the transition was pretty smooth. I don't think anyone really condemned him or anything like that. I think people were really excited and happy with the Batman, what he did with the Batman series, and then Inception and Interstellar. He's done well with his increase of budget.
Yeah, and he's retained his artistry. CJ, how about you? Give us a couple.
I mean, first off, I just want to say about Rian Johnson, please don't forget The Brothers Bloom, which I think is a pretty underrated
film. Mark
that's
Ruffalo,
right.
Dang.
Yeah, like that. I think that's very underappreciated.
Adrian Brody too, right?
Yeah, Ringo Kikuchi, who was like Gray and Rachel Weisz,
wow, that's right.
And then,
magician guy I love narrated it.
Who?
Ricky Jay? No,
Ricky Jay.
Oh yeah,
Ricky narrated
it. Yeah.
Oh, I forgot about that. You see, it's been so long, but yeah, no, I just remember I was like, this movie's actually good. I was surprised that it kind of went under the radar so much. But to go on certain directors, I remember at the Toronto Film Fest years back, I watched this movie that Monsters by Gareth Edwards.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it was, I mean, it's nice in retrospect now because like he was there and he was obviously like he was just this really kind of quiet, bashful guy who, like as people, if they don't know, that Gareth Edwards made this incredibly tiny budget sci-fi monster movie about aliens invading Earth and kind of like the followed of in the aftermath, and it's really amazingly done. It's more about atmosphere and environment building.
Such restraint in that film.
Yeah, such restraint, and that's mostly because of budget. But even what's there is it's just the kind of like intelligently done independent filmmaking where it's not about doing things out of your reach. Some people, they try and do stuff that's too much and it ends up looking bad. They have bad special effects or whatever, whereas he kind of knew exactly how to do that perfect balance. So he ended up getting plucked and doing Godzilla.
The most logical jump ever.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like
that's
I was
true.
going to say, another indie director. I'll just jump into this. Is Colin Trevorrow, who did Safety Not Guaranteed, and I believe isn't he doing a Star Wars spinoff or he's doing something?
He was on tap to do one of the spinoff ones.
Yeah, so that one I found very interesting because sure, his film had like sci-fi elements, like it centered around the guy saying he had a time machine, but it really was more of just a kind of a dramedy. Mm-hmm. That was a kind of a cutesy film. So that one, no, Colin Trevorrow is doing Jurassic Park, isn't he?
Yeah, he's doing Jurassic World.
Yes.
Get
Jurassic
it right.
World. Jurassic Park reboot, sequel, whatever. That's basically. So that was surprising to me. That's one of the ones where I'm really curious to see what happens because it seemed like an odd choice. Gareth Edwards makes perfect sense because he did a monster movie and then he does another monster movie.
Yeah, and like Monsters, like I actually watched that not that long ago, and it doesn't even like feel like an indie movie per se because he did do such a great job, but it wasn't like it was like a single location or anything like that. Like his gorgeous, like he got to shoot a lot. He had to have some budget. Do you have any idea like what kind of budget he had for that? It never felt like a low budget.
It was low. It was like
because he does have special effects, and then it does look really. It looks like he didn't have a ton, and there wasn't a lot of it was sort of implied and sort of off screen, which was
suggested,
which was really, really cool. I mean, definitely there was definitely some in there, and it looked really good. But
he did all the special effects on his own computer. I don't remember a specific number being waved around, but I think it was low 5 figures in terms of the budget.
That's
wow.
crazy.
So, yeah, that is.
Yeah, it's crazy, and like Bernard said, what's key to that is the restraint. And in Godzilla, a movie that I didn't particularly care for, I think it was fine. I know Bernard liked it a lot less than I did, but you can see qualities from his from Monsters kind of seeping into Godzilla, I would think one is his restraint. I mean, Godzilla doesn't really get a profile until the end. A lot of it is more suggested. There's that sequence that I thought was a really nice touch. Some people didn't like it where, there's this big Godzilla fight being ramped up, and then instead of showing it, it cuts to the next day, and you kind of see it playing in the background on TV.
I like that.
Yeah. I thought, okay, that I kind of like that touch. A
lot of stuff happens off screen for him. It seemed like, both in Monsters and it sounds like in Godzilla as well, that things sort of happen, but not necessarily. And I like that. He kind of has different ways of showing that then, too. And
environment building. That's the other one. I think that he has a really great sense of establishing locations. I think that the location that takes up most of the first act of Godzilla, which is the kind of abandoned city after a nuclear meltdown, I was like, you could do a whole movie in that location. That's why I thought watching it. So it's interesting to see those qualities seep through. But that's the one I think, because I've seen now the transition that's an indie director I point to.
Yeah, it was a really smooth transition for Gareth Edwards. I think that made a lot of sense going from Monsters to Godzilla. And, I think I want to mention somebody who's a director, a filmmaker who's really close to my heart, because I grew up, kind of loving his movies, particularly the Evil Dead series. Sam Raimi, who went from the smallest budget you could probably have making the Evil Dead, and he went on to do some big budget stuff. Not all of it was great, but he did the Spider-Man movies, of course. And what else did he do?
The Oz movie that just came out last year.
The Oz movie, which I heard was not so great, but I don't know. I haven't seen it, but I always had a place in my heart for Sam Raimi, and I was happy to see that he made a name for himself.
I was happy too, because I was a huge fan of the Evil Dead series growing up. Now I kind of think that he's one of those directors that's kind of been completely destroyed by his transition to the mainstream.
I think so. I think you're right. You're right.
To me, he's like him, Terry Gilliam are two directors I point to where it's like, you want to see why CGI is bad and ruins people? Like, look at those two. Like, those two got killed by CGI. They have awful CGI, and it's used so badly and so frequently, it kind of just kills everything. So I mean that'd be an example.
Maybe he's an example of someone who didn't transition well into.
No, yes, I think he's a great example of that.
Yeah,
and someone who go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and Nolan, as you guys were talking about earlier, is a great example of someone who transitioned well, because, as you said, he kept the authorial voice.
Yeah,
he has a kind
artistry.
Of like an auteur quality going forward.
And I think who I also think took that good route into the mainstream was a similar kind of route. It was Darren Aronofsky.
Yeah.
Who he started with Pi and Requiem for a Dream, and is now making friggin' like Noah's Ark and stuff.
Noah,
yeah. And I think he made a pretty seamless transition into the mainstream, as not really the mainstream. It's hard to say, even though he's nominated for Oscars all the time. People love him. People love Darren Aronofsky.
Aronofsky's a fascinating case to me, though, because he did start that way, because he did Requiem for a Dream. I don't think then he made The Fountain, right? And it was going to be this big budget spectacle, Brad Pitt, blah. Mm-hmm. Then it kind of went to hell, and he did like a cheaper version with Hugh Jackman and Rachel Weisz. And then it was like, after that experience, he ended up going back to the indie roots, and he did, The Wrestler, the small budget, very inspired by the Dardenne brothers, kind of handled camera and all that. Then he did Black Swan, which is kind of starting to marry the two styles, because he did something that was a little more, I don't know the word, maybe expressionistic, or I'm not sure. But and those two films, mainly because of their Oscar buzz, ended up doing extremely well. Like Black Swan made like almost $300 million worldwide, and then that catapulted him. So that's interesting to me. I always find that interesting, because it was like he had to go back to the roots.
Well, it basically seemed like he got for some reason he got a lot of budget for one film, and there was only really one film in there that was sort of out of place. It is kind of weird that it was sort of in the middle there, but it was like all of a sudden he got like a big contract or a lot of budget, to do The Fountain, but then went immediately back to his roots. And then now back into Noah. And maybe he's doing like every fourth film or something like that, or every other film.
I think Christopher Nolan kind of does. Like, he'll do a Batman movie, then he'll do one he wants to do, and then he'll do another Batman movie.
Yeah, he did, because he did, what is it? Then he did, like, Dark Knight, and then he did Inception.
Right.
And then he did Dark Knight Rises, and now he's doing Interstellar.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. I mean, there's always actors that, say you do the bigger movies so you can do the smaller ones. I mean, that's kind of like sort of this, saying that they like to throw out there. And the same might be true, I guess, for directors. With Noah, that didn't. I actually didn't. I saw it like after sort of everyone else did, and it didn't get the best reviews sort of right out the gate. But I liked it. I mean, I didn't mind Noah. I saw some darkness a little bit to it. But it just didn't feel like necessarily an Darren Aronofsky film. But I think he handled it all right.
Do you have any other picks?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say Joss Whedon because he's
he seems to fit for those who are fans of him, because he has the independent filmmaker. Basically Buffy had the same sensibilities as an independent film. It was all him.
Yeah, he kind of came from TV. Yeah, but
right.
Kind of the similar. Where now he's doing. I would say that just because, he did Buffy and Angel and Serenity, but then now he's doing some of the biggest budget films. The Avengers, that's a huge...
And then he filmed Much Ado during the Avengers, which is
which is another case of him, a director, sort of going back and doing something that he wanted to do, a more personal project.
And he just wrote a movie that came out this year that played at Tribeca and then got put online the next day. He didn't direct it, but he wrote it.
Yeah, I saw that.
What was that?
I forget the title.
In Your Eyes.
Yeah, In Your Eyes.
Dang.
Yeah,
clutch.
He wrote it, but he didn't. He didn't direct it. But it came out at Tribeca. Yeah, and I saw that. And I believe I reviewed it for the site waytooindie.com. But might have to double check. I know I watched it.
Yeah, I have a few more just to throw out there really quickly. Doug Liman, who went from Swingers and Go to The Bourne Identity and The Edge of Tomorrow, which just came out this year. There's also a surprising one. When I was in high school, the Asian kids at my high school hated me because I wouldn't hang out with them. I didn't hang out with them, but they loved this movie called Better Luck Tomorrow, which is an all Asian cast, and it was directed by Justin Lin, who went on to direct all the Fast and Furious, not all of them, but the more successful Fast and Furious movies, which are doing really well now. And also Steven Soderbergh, I think, fits with his career and his career trajectory, although I think he's kind of retreated back into the not making films spectrum, although I don't believe he'll stay there.
I don't think anyone does.
Yeah, I don't think anyone does. And then Mark Webb, to a lesser extent, he did 500 Days of Summer, and then he went on to do Amazing Spider-Man. And Bryan Singer, with The Usual Suspects, and then went on to do the X-Men movies and such. He also did At Pupil earlier, which is a bigger budget, but...
Duncan Jones is doing World of Warcraft now.
That's right. Oh, did you see... Has anyone seen the trailer of that outside of Comic-Con?
No.
I have not.
I really want to see it. I'm interested.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested, too. Not in the subject matter as much as just because Duncan Jones, is a pretty legit... a sort of small director that I kind of forgot about.
How about Moon?
Yeah,
Dang.
Exactly.
Dang. I think we covered a lot of the main ones. There are a ton of indie directors who moved up to the mainstream, but I think we covered a lot of the ones we love and some of the ones we didn't love. Sam Raimi. But that's the first episode of Way Too Indiecast. And please chat with us on social media as well. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we also have personal accounts on Facebook and Twitter. CJ, let's talk about yours. What's your Twitter handle?
My Twitter handle is CJ_PRIN. Prin. I couldn't get Prince; it was taken. So,
Dustin, where can we find you on Twitter?
At DJancic.
All right, at DJancic on Twitter. My Twitter handle is BJ_Boo, and I've actually got my review of Guardians of the Galaxy, which you can find on the site, and I've also got a video series on our YouTube channel, and you can find it on the site as well, called Secret Stash, where I talk to filmmakers and actors about their favorite obscure indie films or kind of films that got lost in time. It's a really cool project I've been working on. You guys should go check that out. Thank you, everybody, so much. Film lovers, we love you back, and we'll see you next time.